Okay, so let's start. Hi, everyone. What are we doing tonight? Actually, it's the last class of the series. I realized this at the end of last week. So the goal of what I want to do today is talk about two major topics in David's life. One major topic, which has subtopics. That is rebellion and how he faced two rebellions in his life. And then I want to sort of sum up and conclude his life. Not his life, conclude the book. Though he actually lives for the first couple of chapters of the next book of Sefer Melachim. But we're going to talk. But we're not going into that. We're going to conclude the Sefer of Shemuel. And what I want to say before we start, and I really should have said this the whole series, is this was a thematic series. We went through a lot of ideas and topics in the book, but there is way more to look into. I skipped around certain things, or I glossed over certain things that necessarily weren't things that I wanted to focus on in that, in the theme or in the topic that I was going for. But there is so many things to continue learning and delve deeper in the book of Shemuel. It's one of my favorite books. I've learned it and taught it many times, and every time I do, there's more and more to grasp and to learn. So I'll say this again at the end, but I hope you enjoyed, and I'm happy. I'll say this again at the end, but to recommend further, if anyone wants to be in touch with me that they enjoyed, to recommend further readings or, different commentaries or things to follow that you could maybe delve more deeply in, highly recommend that. So that's just my little preamble to the class, I guess, and to the whole series as it comes to a close. So like I said, today we're going to talk about, here, let me do this. Hold on, let me just put this so we can see. The rebellion David faces and how he emerges as a true leader. That's what I titled this class. And where we spoke last time, where we ended off last time, was the fact that we spoke about David's his humanity and his faults in his sin with Bathsheba, and we saw how we were starting to see how Avshalom, in response to the rape of his sister Tamar by Amnon, how he starts to not be on the same path as David, and to start where ultimately we're going to see he rebels against his father. So what happens is Avshalom, we know from last time we spoke about this a little bit, but I'm going to start with this. Avshalom lo haya ish yafeh b'chol Yisrael להלל מאוד מכף רגליו ועד קודקודו לא היה בו מום. So there was no one in Israel that was as good looking as him, and he was, attractive, and we see also he's going to be charismatic, and he had very long, luxurious hair, this long, crazy hair, which is also going to play a part in his character and his story. So we see, however, that this is not the case. The physical is not the case that shows us what a true leader is. And we see this way back when Shemuel was anointing the second king, when he was anointing David, and he was looking at his brothers, if you remember, and he sees his older brothers were very good looking and tall, and God tells him, Al tabit amarehu ve'elgo v'kamato ki mastiu ki lo asher yireh adam ki adam yireh la'anayim v'adonai yireh levav. And he says, God sees what's in, people see what's outward, and God sees the heart, what's really in and the essence of a person. So this is going to be something that we see as a theme throughout the leadership, is that it's about the essence and not about the physical, the look. And we also saw that again with Shaul, how he was constantly described as Neshama V'mala, and he was very good looking, but it didn't succeed. It was about his essence. So that's where we are with Avshalom. So what happens, if you just recap quickly, part of David's punishment from Bathsheba is that there's going to be a ra'a mitoch beto. There's going to be something, an evil from within his house. And this is going to be what happens with Avshalom now. Well, it's connected, right? Remember, Avshalom is someone who has a lot of patience, and he plans things out. He's very meticulous, and he knows what he wants to do. So he realizes, he plans this whole thing out. Now he plans this whole thing out. And he sees we saw last week about how he planned a death for his brother Amnon. That also took him time, made a whole elaborate plan. And now we see that he's going to start a rebellion. Okay, so if you remember, he was exiled. David brought him back, but it was a very cold welcome. He didn't see him for many years. Finally, through threatening Yoav, Avshalom got to see the king. He gets this very cold kiss, right? Avshalom was not having it, and that was the last straw. And Avshalom says, thinks to himself and plans this rebellion. Now, what does he do? He's obviously, number one, we said he's good looking, but he's also very charismatic. He's a people's person. We're going to see he gets himself amid kava v'susim v'chamishim ish ratzim lefanav. He gets himself cavalry and people to come before him, and it makes him. It's a big sign of royalty, of stature, of importance. So he's already building himself up, right? And he stands in front of the city, and everyone who's coming into the city to get mishpat hamelech, to get any judgment, he sweet talks them. He tells them, "Tell me your problem. How can I help you?" They're not going to really help you. I'm going to help you. I know how to make sure that whatever you need is going to be taken care of. He tells the people what they want to hear. And it seems through the fact that this is all underlying a little bit, but it seems through the fact that he's very, and by the way, let me finish and I'll say what it seems, that he's kissing them, he's hugging them, he's telling them what they want to hear. And Vayignov Avshalom et lev anshe Israel. He steals the heart of the people. He literally has them wrapped around his finger. And it's interesting because the fact that Avshalom, he's going through a process here. He's buttering them up, but it doesn't seem like he had to try too hard. So it seems in a little bit of a way that the people might have not been so happy with the status quo, what was going on with David. They probably knew what was going on with Bathsheba. That was public already. They probably heard about what was going on with the fact that his son raped his daughter. Half son, half whatever. They were half siblings, but still, not something you want in your family. Obviously, the fact that his other son murdered his other son, that he had to take that act to defend his sister, where David didn't act. So there's a lot of things here where David seems to be a little less active than he usually was, and in his own family. And it was maybe causing the people to say, we need a shift, we need a change. Avshalom is that guy to them. So Avshalom decides after this whole process, we see that it says Vahi miketz arba'im shana, and it doesn't say from what. Well, it was after 40 years, but 40 years from what, right? It doesn't say. And there's different interpretations of when this was 40 years from, and I think each one gives a little bit of a different spin on the story, but they're all. Oh, sorry, I just heard it. Okay, that was weird. I heard that off for a second. Okay. Anyway, it gives a little bit of a different perspective, but they're all interesting, I think. So I'm just going to mention a couple of them. One is that it was the 40 years from when Bnei Israel asked for a king, right? Way back in the beginning of the book. Another one was saying that it was from when David became king. So this was toward the end of his malchut. So either way, it's showing that we're sort of at a transition or tension period in the people, whether it be they're already fed up from having monarchy, they're fed up from David, they're sort of not really feeling it at this point. And Avshalom asked David, his father, he says, when I was in Gashur, when I was out in the galut from you, I made a neder that I would give a korban when I came back, and I would give it in Hebron. So can I go do that? And David tells him, yes, you can. So it's very interesting because this whole story is going to be a disguise of him starting his rebellion. So it's interesting to note that that his excuse or his story, his alibi of going to do a korban in Hebron is similar to what Shemuel had to say when he went to Bethlehem to anoint David. So it's interesting he's using that same, I don't know if it was conscious or not, but it's interesting that he's using that same story to cover up what he's really planning to do. And then he goes to Hebron. So interesting, why does he choose Hebron, Avshalom? So there's a few reasons that I found that why he chose it, and I feel like they're all based in, they all could be true. Number one was he was born there. we saw when David was ruling in Hebron and it lists his sons, Avshalom was there. So it could feel maybe he had some familial, some familial connections or friends or a community there that he might have had, living the years he lived there. It could also be that the people of Hebron, Sheva Yehuda, right? They were the first to anoint David. He made Hebron the capital. And then David, unlike Shaul, instead of showing favor to his tribe, right? Shaul, a lot of times we saw he showed favor to Binyamin. Here, David is always trying to not show favor to any specific Shevet and to unite the people, right? That was his goal throughout his monarchy, as we saw many, many different times throughout the series, right? Throughout the different classes with Avner, the way he dealt with Avner after, and Mephibosheth and Ishbosheth and all the people from Shaul's family, and he never tried to divide the people; he always tried to unite them. But from us, our perspective, that might be a good thing. But from Hebron, they might feel slighted, and we're David's people, and he never gave us any special treatment. And you move the capital from Hebron to Jerusalem, which was a more unifying, central location. And maybe they felt, maybe they were harboring some resentment for that. And maybe Avshalom knows that, and he knows that they're going to be happy to side with him because they felt like David never gave them the treatment they deserved. So he goes there and he sends spies, and he says, Shalom Shlachman Adlim B'Kol Shivtei Israel, and he sends spies around Israel saying, when you hear the sound of the shofar, that means we're what's the word in English? Mamlechim. We're putting Avner as king in Avshalom as king in Hebron. So he does that, and then they make him king. And it seems like at that point, a lot of Israel's on his side. He was able to really, really rally the people on his side. Hold on, someone else. A crowning, yeah, thank you. The crowning, yeah, because they didn't anoint him, they crowned him, yeah. So yeah. So now David hears this, right? The messenger comes to tell David, and David. The people were following Avshalom, that a lot of people were after him. And David tells the people in Yerushalayim, we have to get up, we have to run away. David knows what it's like to be on the run. He was running from Shaul for a lot of his life. And he knows also, it seems to be from his language here, he's worried that if he doesn't leave the city, Avshalom's going to come and destroy the city because of him. It seems that he's remembering and holding some fear or guilt from the fact of what happened in Nob, when he says, I saw Doeg was there in Nob, and when Shaul sends Doeg to kill everyone in Nob, it seems like David felt partially responsible, which in a way he sort of was. And he doesn't want that happening. He knows Avshalom wants the Malchut. That means he wants his head. He wants him. He doesn't need other people, but if he has to kill the other people, he will. He knows that about his son Avshalom. So he wants to get out of the city in order to ensure their safety. So he gathers his people. He runs out. He starts to leave the city. And he leaves Eser Nashim Pilakshim L'Shmor HaBayit. He leaves his 10 Pilakshim, his 10 concubines in the house. So this is going to be something important for later. Keep that in mind. And v'kol ha'aretz bochim kol gadol v'kol ha'am ovrim ha'melech over b'nachal Kidyon v'kol ha'am ovrim al pnei derech et hamidbar. So this is a crazy scene if you think about it. The king of Israel, who finally was able to unite the nation, finally was able to establish a healthy type of monarchy that was going on for 5 minutes basically after the whole Avner situation, and it seemed to be a little bit of quiet. Now they're going into Galut, they're leaving, they're crossing the Yarden, right? They're going into the desert, and they're leaving Israel. And David has gone into Galut in his life, right? He went to Galut amongst from the Plishtim, right, when he was running from Shaul. But this is different. This is not an individual person, David. This is Melech Israel that is being forced to leave Eretz Israel. It's a big blow of what's going. I'm saying it's a big shake to the nation, right? And they're crying. They realize that this is such a crazy thing. And we're going to see. I'm going to mention a few people that come to help David or try to help David. And we're going to see how not necessarily those people in particular, they are important, but I'm going to see also what I want to focus on David's response to them. okay, and how he reacts and responds to them. So, and how that's really telling of what's going on in his mind and his dynamic. So Sadok the Kol Levim, Sadok was the Kohen, and he brings Aaron Elohim, Vayitziku et Aaron Elohim, Vayal Eviatar ad Tom Kol Ha'am La'avod Mihadin. So Sadok and Eviatar, the two head Kohanim at the time, they bring the Aaron Hashem to come with David. Because until now, that was what they used to do. If they were wherever the leader was, wherever the strength was, when they were going out to war, they would bring the Aaron, right? We saw that in Shiloh. We saw that at different points in when David was running away, all these things. And David does something here that he sets a precedent. It's a revolutionary precedent. He tells Sadok, he says, no, I established the fact that the Aaron is going to be in Yerushalayim, right? I didn't go so deep into this because I spoke about this in a different series about David and his connection to the land. So I didn't really go so deep into it, but you're feel free to look at it. It was in, I forgot this, it was in God and His Land, I think the series was called, and it was about David, and I talk about this a lot there, but I'm just going to mention it here, is that David brought the Aaron up to Yerushalayim, and he wanted to build the Mikdash, and God said, no, your son will build it, but he still made it like, he set the fact that the Aaron's place now is in Yerushalayim, and he changed the bar of God choosing Eretz Yisrael to God, further choosing Yerushalayim as his center. To where the Mikdash is ultimately going to be built. David sets that stage for his son Shlomo. So here he does something at the time that was revolutionary that says stay in Yerushalayim, and he says your sons Achimat and Yehonatan, which were Aviatar and Sadok's sons, they will be my spies. You stay in Yerushalayim, and they'll send me the information from Yerushalayim, and you'll help me that way, right? So he sends them back with the Aaron. And he sets this idea of Yerushalayim is the place for the Aaron, and we don't separate that. And even though him as a king individually has to go in Galut right now, he does not want the Aaron to have to go in Galut, okay? Which when the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, it does, right? We lose the Aaron, but this is just, he's not fully, he knows, David knows this is the fact that Avshalom's rebelling is part of he knows it's part of the punishment for Bathsheba, but he also has this feeling that, yes, he's accepting the punishment, but he feels that there will be an end. He doesn't fully think or fully feel that his Malchut is going to be totally destroyed. God did promise him that his son will build the Mikdash, but he does know that this is not, a positive time for him, obviously. Then we see Siva, who was the head of the household of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the crippled son of Yonatan. If you remember when they were running away, and it says he was a young boy, and his nurse was taking him, his nanny nurse, whatever you want to call it, and he fell and he got crippled. So Siva comes, and David says, why isn't Mephibosheth here? And Siva makes up the story that we find out later, he makes up the story that Mephibosheth was staying and he thought he could jump onto this rebellion and maybe he will get power in the family of Shaul again. So David, unfortunately, hastily believes this from his emotion, from his fear, even though we'll find out later this is not true. And he tells Siva, you could get all the land of Mephibosheth, and which is, we'll find out later, is not the best thing that he should have done. So David here we see, on the one hand, is acting in some instances with some clarity and strength as a leader, and in others he's acting more emotional. So it's it's a very hard place for him to be right now, because his son is rebelling against him, and he is Melech Yisrael, but he's also having a personal family issue. So it's very hard to divide those two hats that he's wearing. Then he gets to Bachurim, and this guy, Shimei ben Gera, right, who's a family of Shaul, starts cursing him and throwing stones at him and really embarrassing him. And we see this is a remnants of the people that secretly were still on the side of Shaul, didn't really fully want David to be king, still hoped that Binyamin might have some power. And we're going to see also later that comes up. And Shimei is totally embarrassing and cursing David. And again, Avishai ben Sruya, right? The Bnei Sruya with their need for revenge and need for blood and need for doing what's right, he says, let's kill him. And David says, no, this is not the time. I'm accepting this as my punishment from God. And I don't have he doesn't feel like he has the ability right now to kill him, because he knows that this is from God. He knows that this whole process is a punishment, is coming out of the punishment for Bathsheba, and he doesn't kill him. and it's this vision of David, the Melech Israel, is going into Galut with being cursed and throwing stones at him. It's a very depressive state of what's going on, right? It's really really a sad state for the king of Israel, for the nation of Israel. And but at the same time, we're looking at it from David's perspective. The nation is looking at it as Avshalom, this handsome, charismatic leader, is going to start being our king. So it's a hard, it's a little bit of an interesting balance of what's going on from our perspective, knowing the story, knowing the way it ends, knowing the true characters, versus what might have been going on with the heart of the people. Then we see Hushai is called Hushai HaKirei David, the friend of David. He comes and he wants to help David, and David says, "You're going to help me by being a double agent." He tells him, "You go to Avshalom and you convince Avshalom that you're on my side, that you're on his side, excuse me, and that's the way you're going to help me." So he does that, and he goes, and Hushai is very, very smart, and he convinces Avshalom that I follow who God wants to follow, who the true leader is, and you are the true leader, and who better to follow than the son of the person I followed before, and now you're the true leader, and he's not. I'm going to follow you. And Avshalom, he feeds to Avshalom's ego. We see Hushai, we're going to see in a minute also, Hushai is very smart, and he knows Avshalom well, and he knows how to say the right thing that's going to make Avshalom listen to him. Now we switch screens, so to speak, to what's going on in Avshalom's camp. Avshalom has one of the advisors named Achitophel. And when David, I didn't bring the psukim, but when David hears that Achitophel is on the side of Avshalom, he gets very frightened. Because it is said that Achitophel, the narrator, the Navi, tells us that in that time, the words of Achitophel were like the words of God. He was so smart and so intuitive and had such good advice that it was like listening to God. So when David heard that Achitophel was helping Avshalom, he prayed to God the first thing and said, "Please, Achitophel, destroy the advice of Achitophel," because he knew that if Achitophel, if Avshalom took Achitophel's advice, it would be bad for him. So then the answer to that, but I didn't is that Hushai comes and he sets up this double agent thing. However, before Hushai gives is able to give any advice, Achitophel gives advice, which is good advice and sort of good advice for Avshalom, but not good in terms of what he did. He tells Avshalom, "You go sleep with the Pilakshim of your father, because that is a sign that you are the new leader." As we saw when Avner slept with Ritzpah bat Ayah, the Pilegesh of Shaul, that was also a sign of usurping leadership. And that was, if you remember, that was the whole break of Avner and Ishbosheth, and that's when he goes to David's side. So Achitophel is telling Avshalom, "You go sleep with the Pilakshim," right? Those 10 Pilakshim that he left, the 10 concubines that he left in his house, and you assert your authority that way. And Avshalom takes this, a vulgar step further, and he makes it he makes a tent on the roof for all of the Bnei Israel to see, to all of the nation to see, and he goes and sleeps with the Pilakshim, on the roof in full sight of everyone, knowing what he was doing, and making a statement. And it's interesting because on the one hand, it was a statement that I have power and I'm usurping my father's power, but it does seem a little bit that some of the nation wasn't so okay with this, because after we do see that there are people that after this instant do go to David, or more people go to David. So is it because they heard of this, because they were just going? Not really clear, but it does seem that this is, even if you're on Avshalom's side, this is a pretty intense, way to show your power. And it is interesting that he started all of this because of someone of Amnon raping his sister, raping Tamar, and now he's doing a vulgar sexual act to his father's concubines. So just showing that he's maybe not the purest of heart, obviously. So now the king, the David, right? And it's, by the way, I didn't track this, but it's interesting to see, if you, your own knowledge. I'm not going to go through now for time reasons, but to go through these prakim of the rebellion and see when David is called Hamelech David, and it switches back to more personal or a king. And here it's showing a lot that he is the king. And he tells Yoav and Abishai that Avshalom is coming up to them to have this war in the forest. We're going to see in the Yad Ephraim. And as they're going out to war, David doesn't go, right? He stays in the camp. And Yoav and Abishai, Bnei Tzeruya, lead the war, and Ittai is one of his generals also. And and he tells them, "Le'at li lena la'Avshalom, v'kol ha'am sham'u b'sevet hamelech et kol ha'sarim al devar Avshalom." It was known throughout the army that David was saying, "Be easy on Avshalom, take it easy. Maybe like bring him back alive, maybe don't kill him, whatever." But it was known that David was not out for blood. He wanted to end the rebellion, but it did seem, we see this throughout this beginning of the story as well. David always had something in his heart for Avshalom, even though he did all these crazy bad things. So now they go into the battle. It was in the Yad Ephraim, it was in the forest, and it says, it's very interesting that part of the Yeshua being from Hashem, being from God, is that it says the fact that the forest ate more people or killed more people than the sword in the fight. Meaning the fact that it was in a forest helped David more and killed more people. Stop the war and hurt more people than the actual fighting and the sword. So it's just interesting that's the language where you see subtly that God's playing into that. So now we're coming into the battle. Everyone's fighting. Avshalom's people, obviously, Avshalom had more people, but oh, by the way, I didn't. Whatever. I'm not going with that. So now David. David's people are in the forest. Avshalom's with them, and he has more people. And Avshalom, but however, the fact that it's in a forest is not necessarily helping them. So now Avshalom is riding on a donkey, which is a sign of leadership and stature. And he gets stuck. His hair, we said he had this long, hair, and it got stuck in these trees and these bushes. And he was dangling from the tree to the ground. He was, and it's just such a almost funny, mocking type of death that he ends in such a embarrassing way. So we see one of the soldiers sees this and tells Yoav, and Yoav, it seems from the language, Yoav had a monetary reward for whoever was going to kill Avshalom, despite David saying to be careful about Avshalom. So Yoav here seems to be more concerned with the monarchy than David does. Okay, so Yoav says, "Why didn't you kill him?" He goes and he puts 3 spears into Avshalom, wounding him but not killing him, and then he has 10 soldiers go and basically strike him or kill him or whatever till he's dead. Sort of not putting himself completely on the line because he knew that David didn't want this happening, but he got it done. He ended the war by Yoav Shofar, and Yoav blows the shofar. The second time Yoav ends the rebellion, ends the war, right? And not rebellion, ends a war because he ended the war with Avner. When it was back then, when the Malchut was split, he ended it there. He ends it here, and he's going to end it again soon. Now, David hears about this death. He sends messengers. There's a whole thing about that. Also, I'm not going to go into about messengers. But David hears, and he hears that his son Avshalom died, and he goes onto the roof, onto Alit al-Ashad. He goes onto the roof of the gates of the town very publicly, vayivech, and he cries, and he says, "Beni Avshalom, beni Avshalom, mi ten muti ani tachtecha Avshalom beni beni." My son, Avshalom, my son, I should have died instead of you, my son. He's very publicly mourning. Yoav hears this, the people hear this. And the day that should have been a happy day, Yeshua, that the end of the rebellion, becomes a sad day because David's continually mourning publicly. Again, it seems like he keeps, this mourning. And Yoav is not okay with this. Yoav goes and he really, really slams David, right? He tells him, "You embarrassed the people, these people that fought for you and stood by your side. And you did this for the son who took your pilakshim, and look what you're doing. You're being on the side of someone that did something wrong and insulting the people. You can't do this." He puts him in his place. He says, "Get up and go and go in front of the people and stop this mourning and show publicly that you're okay and that this is a good thing, what's going on, that we're reestablishing a malchut," right? And David hears Avshalom. Here's Yoav. And he does the actions. He ends his mourning, and the people see that, and they realize that he's okay, that it's okay. But he puts Amasa, who was the Sar Sava of Shalom and the rebellion, he puts Amasa in as his Sar Sava instead of Yoav. Now, this could be one of David's unifying tactics, maybe showing that I want to unite the nation again, or it could be an insult to Yoav, right? It could be both. But we see again and again, Mali Lachem ben Esruya, David is and Yoav have this foil character. Whenever Yoav is standing strong for the Malchut, David is being too personal, right? We saw this also before. And David realizes that Yoav is right, but he's still maybe slighted by that. And so he makes when they were going back, when he was bringing David is now still.
I lost you. Hold on.
Hello. Sorry. David is bringing the nation is coming back into Israel, into Yerushalayim, and we're going to meet a few people along the way. And we see Shimei ben Gera comes with 1,000 men to apologize to David, right, for cursing him. This is Shimei who cursed him. Now, David has a choice to make here. David could say, I am king, you cursed me. Now he does have that, right? The rebellion's over. And he says, I could kill him, right? He could do that. And that's what Avishai, Menesruya, again, is all for. But David says, no, it is a day of victory. I am not going to kill him. And, as we saw before, when Shaul didn't kill the people that were against him after the victory with Nachash, and so he doesn't kill him, but he does remember this. And he tells at the end of his life, on his deathbed, he tells his son Shlomo, take care of Shimei ben Gera. So it's not that he forgot it, he just realized this wasn't the right time. Then we see Mephibosheth comes and explains himself and says, the reason I didn't come was because I am crippled and I told Siva to help me get to you. And he tricked me and went by himself and made up this whole lie. And interestingly, David says, you and Siva will split the land, even though the Hachamim say he should have given it all back to Mephibosheth. And because of this, they say he got punished with the splitting of the Malchut after Shlomo, that his Malchut ended up splitting because he split this. So that's another interesting repercussion when David acts as an individual who is felt slighted versus a king. So now we see this back and forth. I'm talking about it again in a minute, but this back and forth of David as an individual and David as a king, and how those two things have to play out. Now, when he's coming back in, the Shevet of Yehudah says, I want to be the first ones to escort David back. Yisrael says, no, he's our king. The other Shevatim, and Yehudah says, but he's ours. Let us have some respect. And it seems that this feeling of Yehudah not feeling that David was theirs causes this division between Yehudah and the rest of the nation. And this is something that's going to continue through all Sefer Melachim, right? Like, as if you know the stories, it's all going to continue through Melachim, and it seems to start from here. Well, even before maybe with Shaul, but really it starts from here. And then we have another rebellion. So right when David's finishing the rebellion of Avshalom, we have another rebellion of Sheva ben Bichri, who's from Binyamin, right? Again, these people from Binyamin, maybe the remnants of David, of Shaul, being the Shevet of the original king, that they feel they have that power. And maybe he feels that David's still weakened, that even though the nation took him, Avshalom did get a lot of the nation. Maybe people aren't so happy, and let me take my advantage. And Sheva ben Bichri has a rebellion, but Shevet Yehudah v'ish Yehudah dabku b'malchot min hayarden ad Yerushalayim. They stay with David, the Shevet Yehudah. Now David tells Amasa, very interestingly enough, to go gather the people and let's fight against Shimei. Amasa seems to not be able to do it. Now it's interesting. Like, I was reading different interpretations. Was he not able to do it? Did the people not really feel so secure with David at this time? Did Amasa not really want to do it? Did he want to go on the side of Shimei and rebel against David since he was in a previous rebellion with Avshalom? Did he see that the nation wasn't so much on the side of David, so then he went to the side of Sheva ben Bichri? Not really clear. But Yoav and Abishai end up again taking the defense and taking protection of their monarch, of their king. And he goes and Yoav sees Amasa and he greets him. And it's like such a powerful description of what he does. It says he leans in to give him a kiss, and he holds his to greet him with a kiss, and he holds his beard. And as he's kissing him, he doesn't see Amasa is caught off guard because he thinks this is a friendly encounter. And Yoav takes his sword from his side and stabs him and kills him. And then they continue fighting. And Yoav and Abishai lead the way against the rebellion of Sheva ben Bichri. So it's just like such a a very like interesting description of how this will happen. And then I bring the Psukim, but then his body is lying there. No one even buries him. It's such an embarrassing death for Amasa. And the people are literally trampling him as they're going to fight the rebellion until someone moves him to the side. So it's just very, very embarrassing and dishonorable death, as two was Avshalom's, right? Now he gets to the city where Shmuel ben Gera is in a fortified city protecting himself in Avela Bet HaMa'acha, and they start to surround the city to go inside and destroy the city, as we saw that was done in the war. And this Isha Hama comes from the city, this smart woman, again, a woman, we saw many women, smart women in the story, that, are able to help defer tragedies. And she calls to Yoav and she starts to sweet talk Yoav, and she says, aren't you Yoav? You're a leader, you're this. And you don't want you want Shiva ben Bichri, right? You want this rebellion to end. You don't want to kill the city. He's like, no, of course not. I just want the rebellion to end. She goes, okay, let me use my wisdom, and I'm gonna get the people. I'll throw you his head over the city wall, and then the rebellion will end, and we won't need to kill anyone in the city. He's like, great, if you do that, amazing, right? It's just when you really read these stories and you try to picture them and visualize them, it's like so intense, right? He's grabbing his beard, stabbing him. She's throwing a head over the city wall. Like, it's just really, intense of what's going on, and vulgar and crazy. So the Isha, this woman is able to convince the city, right? However she did it with her wisdom, maybe saying, why are we going to all die for this one guy's stupidity? Let's go the true king. I don't know exactly what she said, obviously, but she gets the people to kill him, and they do throw over his head. And Yoav, again, he blows a shofar and ends the rebellion. And he goes, Yoav Shav Yerushalayim El HaMelech. He goes back to the king. Now, what's interesting is that at this point we see a summary of of David's cabinet, right? And we saw this also previously before the Bathsheba incident, right? And here it really is the end of his malchut, and there's a lot of opinions that say this is sort of the end of the book as a whole, and the end few stories are sort of appendixes to get more into knowing David, but not necessarily in the chronology and the pace of the story as we know it up till now. So there's a few instances at the end of the book. I want to focus in the last, I think it's 4 prakim, but I want to focus on 2 things that really I hope I could, in that will sum up the lesson and will sum up the series. So we see that David, he has a song, he does a shir, and David was a man of songs, right? He was Sefer Tehillim, and a lot of his language, a lot of the things here are also seen mirrored in Tehillim. That's also an interesting study comparing David's life, certain things, to what he wrote in Tehillim, what he wrote here. Also an interesting study to do. And he's basically, the theme of the song is God was always saving me. Gratitude towards God for saving him, especially from Shaul, and he doesn't call out any names here. In Tehillim it calls out names. So more of a personal side of God saving him, but also then he switches to the fact that God always not only saved him, but helped him protect and defend and build the nation in war, and help him be a strong warrior. So we see the 2 sides of gratitude here: personal gratitude and national. And well, I guess it's also personal, but God personally helping him to better the nation, and expand and give security to the nation. So it's really a lot of gratitude towards God from all different angles. And then he says, Devarim Achronim, like his last words, and where he talks about, which on the first glance seem very haughty. It talks about his righteousness and how I always followed God, and doing the right thing, and that's why God made a beat with me, and to continue my line and my malchut. And in a way, it's not necessarily him being haughty, it's him telling people, well, this is the formula. If you want to have a good relationship to God, be righteous, do what he says, and he'll do the beat with you, right? He'll connect with you and do right by you, right? Which many, many leaders, right? Moshe, Yoshua, Shemuel, right? All these leaders say similar things in different ways at the end of their life. Basically, do what God tells you, it will be good. Don't do what God tells you, it won't be good. Do what, so he's sort of ending on that note of recognition of all the good in his life and all the continuity that he will have in his lineage is because of his relationship and righteousness to God. The book finally ends with him buying the land of Arav Nahayevusi after Magefa, whole thing, not going into that now. But also I talk about that in a different class. But he buys the land where the Mikdash is going to be made. And I think, the series I was, the real Game of Thrones, finding leadership, the first leader, the king's monarchy of Israel. And I think that this book is about the building of the monarchy and the building of Malchut Bet David, right? And even though David is not perfect, not even though, I think because David isn't perfect, right? The book does not cover up any of David's faults. We see when he makes mistakes. We see when he is not up to par with what God wants for him. But what he does, which is different than Shaul, is he is able to admit it and correct his ways as much as he can and do tshuva and redeem himself. And at the core of it, and this is, God sees the heart, right? God Hashem yireh levav, is that his heart is always in the direction of how can I connect to God? How can I connect to his people? How can I rule his people, right? And I think that this is a lesson not only for leadership, but for also individually, is acknowledging that we're all going to have faults, right? The only perfect being is God, right? Humanity by definition is faulted, right? Is fallible. So we're never going to be able to be perfect, but that doesn't mean that our relationship with God or people in that matter, right? Even with our relationship with our friends, with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, with everyone, there's always going to be challenges and faults and things that we do wrong and they do wrong. But at the end of the day, if our core of that relationship is trusting that we're going to be on the same page and committed, then that's where David has the brit. And that's why throughout Sefer Melachim, even though the Malchut is going to be split, even though there are many, horrible stories of kings from both Yisrael and Yehuda that did bad things, even though the end of Sefer Melachim ends with Galut it doesn't negate the fact that there always is Ner LeDavid, right? God always makes sure there is a connection and a monarch and a shevet for David HaMelech because of his relationship with him, because of his ability to be human and still connect and still realize that is a priority overall. And I think that that's why we still will say and sing in our, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, because, and that the Mashiach is going to ultimately, we pray for the Mashiach, Ben David, right? It's all, I think, from all these lessons in Shemuel and from the story of like building up his relationship and building up who he was from the way way in the beginning of being a Ro'eh Son and being, running from Shaul and finally, starting in Hebron, building. All of this leads to us seeing, and I think the beauty is also in the faults. The beauty is also in the acceptance of this, the rebellion of his son and accepting his punishment and not being quick to judge like Yoav and Avishai, that I need to take my revenge right away, and accepting that, yes, sometimes things are going to be bad, because I don't want to say like things are bad because you deserve it, but to acknowledge that things aren't always going to be perfect. And that doesn't mean I have to start manipulating and controlling everything. It means sometimes I have to ride the wave and see how I could best handle it. So I think through all those things, a lot of this is my opinion, obviously, so take it or leave it, but that's really what I personally take from Sefer Shemuel and from David HaMelech. And I think, like I said in the beginning, I think that there is so much more to go into in Sefer Shemuel. We did it thematically. I skipped over. I focused on more things, didn't focus on other things. But there's so much. Every time I've taught it and learned it many times, and there's always a new angle, and there's always something new to learn. It's always so. Like I said before, I hope if you enjoyed, feel free to be in touch or look for your own self to more readings and learning. And I hope you enjoyed. I will hopefully. I think I'm going to be doing another series. I think it's starting in February. I think the SCA is going on a break now. So look out for that in the coming weeks. And thank you. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
What's the next topic?
Still working it out. Not sure yet. We're talking it over with Amy, and that's like trying to figure out what the topic is. So when we decide, I'm sure they'll be sending out all their messages and things.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Have a good night, day, wherever you are.